Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. Dr. Brett Hill is co-host of two of Australia's top-rated health podcasts, public speaker, paleo advocate, chiropractor, barefoot runner, and author of numerous books and ebooks. He regularly appears on TV, radio, and in print, and his media appearances, seminars, coaching, and consulting have inspired thousands of people over the last decade to live a long, happy, healthier life full of energy and vitality. I'm so privileged to have you, Dr. Brett, today, have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks for having me on board. It's a pleasure to be on board.
Excellent. There's so many things to talk about. But firstly, can you give us a bit of an overview of what a chiropractor actually does? And then maybe even touch on, is there a difference between one chiropractor to the next?
Yeah, absolutely. So chiropractic traditionally has always been about the spine. So really what we focus on is the spine. But what I guess many people don't understand is the reason why we focus on the spine. And, you know, it's really all about the nervous system. So the spine encases and protects the nervous system. When the spine's not functioning right, then the nervous system doesn't function right. Your nervous system controls everything in your body. So your cells, your tissues, your organs, and your glands. And so chiropractic is really at its core about optimizing the performance of your body, including, adapting, repairing, regenerating, but also, athletic performance and just performance in everyday life by making sure there's no interference to your nervous system. And that's it. So it's a manual therapy designed to detect what we call subluxation, so areas of your spine that aren't functioning very well, that are interfering with your nervous system, to get those joints functioning better, to get the interference away from your nervous system so that your whole body functions better. Now, the follow-up, I guess, the second part of that question is, yes, there are lots of different types of chiropractors. So, and there's kind of two distinct differences, I guess. One of those is in technique. So there are many different chiropractic techniques out there, ranging from some very low force techniques, which can be, very, very light touch, right through to some more manual techniques, which involve, hands-on manual adjustments on the spine. Probably the bigger difference is in terms of philosophy. So there's a broad range of philosophy within chiropractic as well. And so traditionally chiropractic was a very holistic, vitalistic profession, much like what I've described to you, that it was always just about removing interference in the nervous system and allowing the body to heal itself and allowing the body to perform at its best. I guess as we've gone on within chiropractic, there's been an evolution of chiropractic in some sorts where, some elements of chiropractic have adopted more of, I guess, a medical paradigm around that as well. And so they're looking more so at, diagnosing and detecting specific diseases or disorders or injuries and trying to correct those, trying to help people heal from those injuries. So it's a much more symptomatic approach, generally, wait until someone gets in pain and then trying to patch them up out of pain and then sending them on their way. So there's a broad scope within the profession from that really mechanistic, removal of pain end of the spectrum through to the much more optimal performance wellness end of the spectrum, which is saying, well, look, regardless of whether it's causing you pain or not, this interference to your nervous system isn't a good idea, and your body would perform better without it, including healing and repairing from pain, but also much more beyond that in terms of your overall health and your overall body's performance. So there's quite a range within the profession, which is great. People will find, I guess, the chiropractor that suits them, which is good for people to understand that, if just because you go see a chiropractor and may not have the experience you're looking for, doesn't mean there's not a chiropractor out there for you. I can often liken it to a mechanic where people say, no one says, I went to a mechanic once, he wasn't very good, so I'm not going to service my car anymore. So finding the right chiropractor for you is a really important aspect of that too.
That's absolutely true. And just from a personal experience, I once went to a chiropractor and just had a really amazing experience and felt like it was that person that you were talking about that did a sort of a more of a manual therapy, and that really suited my body. And I felt like he also took a holistic approach. And so I was quite impressed with chiropractors. But then I went to another one, and it was just like going to I wouldn't have even called him a chiropractor in my mind of a chiropractor. It was, he used a device. It was sort of like a little pen, and he sort of wiped it over my body and pushed every now and then very gently. And I didn't feel it did anything for me. And so I just wonder, what sort of questions should we ask a chiropractor just to make sure that that's the right one for us?
Yeah, cool. So the little pen is called an activator. I actually use one of those quite a lot. And so
So
it's just a
basically,
different way.
I've just told everyone, don't go to Dr. Brett, because
No,
he's going
no, no.
to, but maybe
What
it's a
you've said
different
is
way
that
of
I'm not
using
the
it.
right chiropractor for you, and that's totally okay.
Well, not
right?
necessarily. It could even be the way the pen was used. It wasn't very hard at all. There was no manual therapy. So it'd be interesting to find out more about how you use the pen as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So an activator is a very small amplitude adjustment. So what it does is it does a small amplitude thrust, but it's very fast and it's a very specific target area. So it actually imparts the same amount of torque into your spine as a manual adjustment. It just feels very, very different. One of the biggest differences you'll notice with it is often when you have a manual adjustment, you actually get a release of endorphins as a result of that. So you get that instant hit of, oh my God, that feels better. Because it's basically like natural morphine. Right? Now, the thing is that instant hit that you feel, that's actually not the real effect of the adjustment. That feels nice for a short period of time, but the real purpose of the adjustment is to remove that interference from your nervous system so your body performs better. That happens not in the first half hour after the adjustment, but that happens in the days, weeks, even months after the adjustment, when your body's free from interference as your body continues to heal and adapt and repair. So there's heaps of different ways to do the adjustment. But really, what you want to focus on is that long-term result that you get from the adjustment. So in terms of questions to ask, well, it depends on what your goals are. So, if your goal is to get out of pain as quickly as possible, then, you might be asking questions about, well, I've got this specific injury. Do you deal with those? Is that something you can help me out with? If you know that you prefer a particular technique, for yourself, you may prefer a manual adjustment. Then you can say, well, what sort of techniques do you use? Do you manual adjustments? Do you lower force adjustments? What do you prefer? I see lots of kids in my practice. I see lots of families in my practice. I see lots of pregnant ladies, and I see lots of athletes as well. And very often, many of those people come and see me specifically because they prefer those lower force techniques. Some of them feel like it's safer. The reality is all forms of chiropractic are very, very safe, but some of them feel more comfortable with those lower force adjustments, and that's often why they seek me out. But then you might also want to ask questions. If your intention is more around wellness and optimal performance, then you might want to ask some questions around that as well. So, you might say, what's your typical care plan for people? How often do people usually come in for example? And so the answer to that can vary. If they're very much a pain-based chiropractor, they might say, well, usually people come in for about 6 visits. If you come and see me, I'm very much a wellness and performance-based chiropractor. My answer would be, well, as long as you choose to keep getting those benefits for, it's a bit like going to the gym. If you want to keep your body in shape, then you keep going to the gym on a regular basis to keep it functioning as well as it can be. In the same way, if you want to keep your spine and nervous system in shape, understanding the stresses of our modern lives and that there is going to be a lot of stress on your spine and nervous system as a result of that, then having a regular adjustment, people in my practice have been coming to see me for over 10 years now. And they come in on a regular basis to keep their body functioning at its best. So there's a variety of questions you could ask, but it really depends on what you're looking for from your chiropractor.
And you mentioned there's a lot of clients that just come in for that maintenance, and I think as an athlete, it's vital to have a caretaker such as a chiropractor that does that. So how often would you, assuming that the spine is relatively healthy but the person's quite active, how often would you recommend their visits be?
Once again, it really varies. I would draw, just to be really pedantic about it, I draw a distinction between maintenance and wellness care. And so really I look at chiropractic as there's kind of 3 forms of chiropractic care you can have there. There's crisis care, which is, well, you wait until you've got a symptom, you go see the chiropractor and try and get it fixed. There's maintenance, which is generally you have enough chiropractic care to make sure that you maintain your body so that those symptoms don't come back. And then there's wellness, which is actually getting adjusted so that you make sure that your spine and nervous system is at its absolute peak for as much of the time as you possibly can so that you get the best out of your health and you get the best out of your performance. So I draw a distinction between those 3, right? And depending on which one of those you're aiming for, then there's going to be a difference in how often you need to come in. Right? So crisis care, well, you just wait till it hurts and then you come in. Maintenance care, typically people who come in to see me in the practice who are maintenance care would probably come in about once a month for a tune-up. Wellness care, your average sort of person on the street who's under wellness care in my office usually comes in once a fortnight. So once again, and the key then with that is that rather than being a massive overhaul, it's just a little fine tune, just a little tweak to keep things going as well as it possibly can be. And then some of the people who come to see me in the practice who are more sort of elite athletes, they'll come in once a week because they just want to make absolutely sure that there's nothing interfering with their optimal performance, whether that's training or in, on an event day. And so they'll come in once a week to make sure that everything is absolutely as good as it can be.
Great. So it really depends case by case. And,
yeah, absolutely.
And I guess how much importance you place on wellness.
Yeah, exactly. So, and really that's what wellness is about. So, I have people who come in and see me in my practice who are on all of those options, because I see my role as a chiropractor and particularly as a wellness practitioner, when you're talking about wellness, to me, wellness means that the individual is in charge. Wellness isn't about me standing there telling them what to do and them just blindly following it. It needs to be an active process, both within my practice and outside of my practice, in terms of, the chiropractic care they get within my practice, but also the things they do outside of the practice in terms of their diet, their exercise, their mindset, all of those other aspects, which are really important in terms of them getting the best results. So, but I see my role then as giving them the best possible advice. So I tell them, I say, these are your options. Which one do you want to do? And if that's what you want to do, then this is my advice in terms of how often you come in. But I also tell them, well, you're in charge. So whatever you choose to do with that, my job is to give you the information and give you the best possible advice I can. Your job is to decide what you do with that. And so then people will say, well, look, I'd like to come in however often. I say, great, let's do that. And every 12 visits, we'll do a re-exam, we'll remeasure these tests. And we do a lot of testing in the practice, not just around pain, but around function. So we do testing of your neurology, we test your balance, your coordination, your spinal stability to make sure that we know exactly what's going on. And, obviously, depending on whether you're doing crisis care, maintenance care, or wellness care, you'll see differences in that performance. And then that allows people to make more informed decisions as they go forwards as well about whether they're happy with that or whether they'd like to see that improve a bit as well.
And Dr. Brett, your wellness care that you do, it sounds a bit different to the average chiropractor. Is that fairly unique these days to actually offer that wellness aspect? And because I know from listening to your podcasts and interviews, you actually do a lot more than just look at the spine. You talk to them about their lifestyle, about what they're eating, how much they're sleeping, all of those important factors. Is that quite unique to your practice, do you think?
Oh, I wouldn't say unique to my practice, but I would say that unfortunately it's probably less common than it used to be within chiropractic. Chiropractic has sort of, moved much more towards the mainstream now. It's been taught in universities, incorporated into Medicare and all those sort of things. And as a result of that, it has been a little bit more medicalized. It's become a lot more like the medical profession in many ways. And some of that wellness aspect has unfortunately been lost within the profession. But there are still certainly a good number of chiropractors who do practice in that way. If people are looking for one pretty much anywhere around the world, I help them find them. And so if someone wants a more wellness-focused chiropractor, there's certainly people all around the world doing that. And a decent percentage, probably the minority of the profession, unfortunately, I would say nowadays, but there's certainly, plenty of chiropractors out there doing it. I guess probably the difference for me is I probably do it on a much more public scale as well in terms of talks and podcasts and books and that sort of stuff too.
Excellent. And look, I've spoke to many osteos and many physios who also deal with wellness like yourself, and they all suggest a very similar thing in terms of maintenance and then wellness. And I guess my question to you is, I can't afford to go and see a chiropractor every second week, an osteo every second week, a physio every second week. How do you decide who to see, and what's actually the difference between an osteopath, a physio, and a chiropractor?
Yeah, so I guess once again, it depends on the osteopath, the physio, and the chiropractor. There's a broad range within all of those professions. As a general rule, if you are looking for more of that wellness focus, as a general rule, chiropractors probably are more wellness focused than the other two. Now, once again, there's exceptions to that, and the most wellness focused physios are probably way more wellness focused than the least wellness focused chiropractors, if that makes sense. So there's a range within that. But as a general rule, chiropractors are going to be more wellness focused and they're going to be more optimal performance focused. Physios will tend to be more pain orientated in terms of, diagnosing what's wrong with you and trying to fix that problems. So they're a bit more reductionistic as opposed to holistic with the chiropractic profession. And the physios will tend to work more on the muscles and the ligaments and the soft tissues, whereas chiropractors focus more on the spine and the nervous system. So my advice to people, I guess, is it depends on what you're looking for. Again, I kind of keep saying that, but it does depend on what you're looking for. So if you're looking for general health, wellness, and optimal performance, I would definitely be going to see a chiropractor because that's what they can really help you out with. If you've got an acute injury and you're looking to get that healed or fixed as quickly as possible, then that's probably something you go see a physio for. If you've sprained your ankle or if you've strained a muscle, if that injury keeps happening again and again, though, you're going to need to try and find out what's the underlying structural and neurological reason why it keeps happening. Then once again, you want to go see a chiropractor because if those muscles keep tightening up, if they keep getting injured, if they're not healing the way they're supposed to, then your body's not doing what it's supposed to be doing. There's an underlying cause of that, and you need someone who's going to take the longer term view and look for that underlying cause and help you resolve it. So once again, I'd be looking at a chiropractor for that too. Osteopaths and chiropractors, once again, they're actually really similar. The university I went through, Macquarie University in Sydney, that used to be the Sydney College of Chiropractic and Osteopathy. So they actually used to graduate from there as a chiropractor and an osteopath. Both chiropractors and osteopaths work on the spine to get it functioning better. Chiropractors tend to focus more on the nervous system. Osteopaths tend to focus more on the blood flow, sometimes the muscles and the organs as well. So there's a slight difference there. Once again, I think because of the primacy of the nervous system, that really does control everything else that's going on in your body. That if you haven't got your nervous system functioning right, then really nothing else is going to function right. And it doesn't matter how hard you work, how much you try to get it sorted out. If you've got an underlying structural and neurological issue, then you're not going to get the best results. And that's why I think for most people, heading to a chiropractor to start with is the way to go.
Interesting. So you mentioned injury. If someone has an injury and they need it fixed, as soon as possible, then maybe a physio is better. But what if it was an injury to the spine?
Yeah. So look, obviously injuries, I should have clarified that. Injury to the spine, look, chiropractors really are the experts in the spine. That's what we focus on. I spent 6 years at uni, and what we focused on was the spine. We do some peripheral stuff and we look at knees and ankles and hips, but really the spine is the primary focus of what we do. And so I think if you've got a spinal injury, then you definitely want to be going and seeing a chiropractor. We're the experts in that field.
And then would you also say that everything's almost like connected to the spine? So maybe you think you've got a foot issue, but if you get your spine sorted out that you didn't even know was an issue, maybe your foot will actually get better?
Absolutely. Happens all the time. And we get so many people who come in with ankle injuries, knee injuries, hip injuries, shoulder injuries, and they've been getting, once again, quite reductionist treatment. They've had someone working on their shoulder again and again and again and just not getting the results. And we see that, shoulder's the classic one. We see that they've got issues with their upper thoracic spine and their neck. They're hunching over, they're rounding forward, putting their shoulder at a disadvantage. And without correcting that shoulder is never going to heal. It's just going to keep happening again and again. You need to get that posture sorted out. You need to get that spine sorted out, make sure the muscles in around that shoulder are getting the right nerve supply. And really, if you want to get the long-term results, that's what you need to do. It may take a little bit longer to really get it back to stable. Take even longer to get it back to as good as it possibly can be. But the investment you put in that initial stage to then get to the stage where things are actually functioning the way they're supposed to be, they're actually performing better, often improve strength, and decrease likelihood of that re-injuring in the future, it's well worth investing that bit of time, effort, and energy to get the underlying cause of the problem sorted out. And the same thing happens, as I said, with the lower limb, with ankles, knees, hips. We see it all the time where there's an underlying issue there, classically a rotation in the pelvis, which just affects that whole lower limb. And until you get that sorted out, you really can't hope to get the best results of sorting everything else out above it.
So how much of your success is about what the person does at home versus what you do with them in that 45 minutes every month or every 2 weeks?
It's an interesting question. I mean, it depends on how you define your success. So I define my success by removing interference from the nervous system because that's what I do. All right. So my job is to remove the interference from the nervous system to allow their body to have the best ability to deal with the stresses of their life, whatever stresses they choose to introduce to their life. So in that respect, I would say that my success of my adjustment has nothing to do with what they do at home because I do my bit and they do their bit and I don't take ownership of that. But I guess, looking at the bigger picture, if you define success as how healthy that person gets and how much they're able to get out of their body and their health and their life, then what they do when they're at home has a massive impact on that. I would say, having a spine free from nerve interference is probably a bigger impact, but it's still what they do when they're not with me is really significant. It has a massive impact on the results they get, on how often they need to come see me, on how long it takes to get better. I see it all the time in practice in terms of people who I know are exercising and eating right and doing the right things when they're not with me, and they just get better results faster.
The reason I ask is because I've recently had an operation, and the surgeon is so impressed with himself about his work. He's like, yep, that was absolutely successful. I'm very happy with that. I'm looking at the x-ray now. I've done a great job. And I'm like, well, maybe, but what if I come back to you in a month's time and I still can't move my arm properly? And he's like, well, I've done my job. I'm sorted. I'm very happy with my work. And so I sort of question that, because obviously, if I go and see a physio now, and I might go and see the best physio in town to fix this injury, if I don't do what they ask me to do outside of the hours that I'm with them, am I really going to rehab to the best ability? And I guess it's the same with a chiropractor.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely not.
So, so it's an interesting, it's just interesting because the mentality that we sort of have today is that pill or that person that I can go and see and be fixed. It's almost like, if I get a personal trainer, I'll become fit.
Yeah, it's that medical model, isn't it? I mean, that's what we get taught, is that you got a headache, you take a pill and it goes away, and so we get into that mindset of wanting someone else to fix it for us. And that's kind of what I was talking about before when I was talking about my responsibility and your responsibility if you come in to see me. I have a responsibility to give you the best possible adjustments that I can, and to give you the best possible advice that I can about what you can do when you're at home. But what you do with the advice in terms of how often to get adjusted and what to do when you're not with me is totally out of my control. There's absolutely nothing I can do about it, and so that's then your responsibility. And as I said, you will absolutely, your results, you will be determined by how well you do that. And if you do that less well, then you'll get lesser results. So, yeah, it absolutely makes a massive difference.
And I also like how you offer those 3 different areas, because a lot of people get injured and then they deal with the problem. But what I love is prevention. And that's why I regularly see people like yourself to get treatments on a regular basis, even though I'm not in pain at all. In fact, quite the opposite. I normally feel great, except when I've had an accident. So I'm all for maintenance. And can you give us an example of maybe a client that you've had who never really had that maintenance, and then maybe they were an athlete or whatever, and then they were actually finally starting to get regular treatments from you, and how that changed for them?
Yeah, look, it's tricky. In Australia, we have very strict regulations now. Our new regulatory body has kind of muzzled us a little bit in terms of what we're allowed to say. So we're really not allowed to share testimonials anymore, unfortunately. So I can't give you a specific case study. But, having said that, there are so many examples we'd have within the practice of people who have done exactly that. People who've come in, they've started out under their care. Commonly what happens is people start to feel better. And so they think that they equate feeling better with being better, because that's what we're taught as we grow up. As I said, we're taught that you take a pill, the pain goes away, and that's fixed the problem. And that's, that then you're healthy. When you're not in pain, you are therefore healthy. But, there's a massive difference between not in pain or not sick and healthy. And so, but it happens a lot because that's the way society thinks. And so people come in, they get to the point where they're not feeling in pain anymore, and they think, great, I feel better, I'm fixed. And they often drop out of care. And I talk to people about this and say, that's okay. If that's what you choose to do, that's totally okay. That's your choice. And what you can expect to happen is this, that, you'll feel better for a while. You'll retain that increased ability you've got to adapt, to repair, and to regenerate, and to cope with your lifestyle stresses for some time. But over time, as your resistance diminishes, your stresses are going to build up, and that's going to come back again, either the exact same problem or an entirely different problem altogether, because your body hasn't yet got back to as good as it possibly can be. It's not going to deal with those stresses as well as it possibly can. And so, I communicate that to people. Often they'll go away for a period of time. Usually at some stage they come back and say, hey, guess what? You were right. It's come back again, and I get it now. I understand. And often I say to people, that's the best thing they can possibly do, is actually often have a little break and see what happens, find out for themselves. Because, it's one thing to take my word for it, but often it's not until people experience it for themselves that they really notice the difference. Unfortunately, that usually means that they wait until they get symptoms again before deciding to come back in again, which is a shame because often those issues have been there and developing quite a lot and for quite a long time before those symptoms start to show up. And so often, there's more issues there that we need to then deal with and get back on track. But, often, as I said, those people come in and they're like, okay, I get it now. I know what happens when I don't. I know what happens when I do. I'm committed now. I'm going to come in and have my regular care. Some people go through that many times before it really clicks, and that's okay too. But I think, I would have hundreds of examples of people who've done exactly that and who are now getting, regular wellness chiropractic care and seeing the benefits in, just all aspects of their life as a result of that.
Great. Excellent. And look, I wanted to ask you another question. It's actually quite a personal question and something that I've been sort of studying and pondering about myself after having an accident and injuring just a part of the body. What are your thoughts on working on the other parts of the body that are not injured while waiting for the injury to heal, in terms of, would you increase the potential risk of asymmetries, or would that possibly be beneficial?
You mean working in terms of exercising, or working in terms of like some sort of chiropractic or physio or those sort of things?
Well, I guess more in terms of the exercise side of things. I think definitely the chiro working on other parts of the body would be beneficial. I think that's a given. But in terms of, say, strength training, for example, and in my particular case, in fact, I've met a lot of people recently who have asked me the same question. They've got a broken arm or they've got a broken shoulder, and they want to work the other side of their body. And would that be recommended, or would you just totally avoid any asymmetries?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, actually. I guess, if you're talking different parts of the body, if you've got a broken arm, then definitely I would say, working on your core and working on your legs is a great idea. I mean, I think that's just a no-brainer. You want to keep your body moving, because movement is really essential for your body. So as much as you can, you want to keep your body moving and functioning. Even the injured limb, you want to, very, very gently, but keep that moving as much as you can. Obviously under the very strict guidance of your doctor and your rehab team as well. And, I should say, none of this is, medical advice, all those sort of caveats that we need to have. Every individual case is different. But, what's interesting, if you talk about the other arm, is there's some really interesting research around that where, what they've shown is that, for example, if you have got a broken right arm and you're unable to use it, that actually doing mirror image exercising and using your left arm, sometimes you can actually use that to help maintain the function of the arm that you aren't using, if that makes sense. So there's really interesting studies where they get people and they put mirrors up and it makes it look like they're moving their right arm when in fact they're moving their left arm, and it tricks their brain into actually maintaining the muscle mass and the function of the limb that they're not actually using. Does that make sense?
Well, it does, because I've read some similar papers, and that's why I sort of asked the question. I sort of wanted to know, what's your feeling around that and your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I honestly don't know the definitive answer to that. I'd kind of hedge my bets a little bit. Like, I think if it was me, I would definitely keep using, well, you kind of have to keep using the other arm anyway, but I would probably still work out the other arm, but I'd try not to overdo it. I'd try and do it in a way that isn't going to create massive imbalances either. So I would probably still use the other arm, but maybe not to the degree that I would if I had both arms available, if that makes sense. So keep it moving, but don't overdo it.
Interesting you say that, because that's exactly sort of the conclusion that I came to, but appreciate your advice on that. I'll let you know. I'll do an N=1 study, and we'll see.
Best.
Last operation was easy because it was a double hip operation, so at least I could work with them both together, or in that case actually not work with either of them for a long time. So that's really interesting. And look, thank you for your insight about chiropractor. I just wanted to move on to another field of expertise, and that is your knowledge and your own personal experience and client experience with barefoot running. Can you give us a bit of a rundown on, firstly, how you got into that, and then also what your thoughts are about barefoot running?
Yeah, sure. So I've sort of moved away from using the term barefoot running because it seems to scare people. Like, people think that if I talk about barefoot running, then they have to go out with no shoes on whatsoever and run on the hard asphalt, and that's going to really suck and hurt. So I tend now to talk more about natural running than barefoot running because I think it sounds nicer and it'd be more palatable for people, and it helps people understand that you can still wear shoes and do it, and that's okay. But in terms of natural running, I got into it. I was, I guess I was about the age of 30. I'd already graduated. I'd been practicing as a chiropractor for about 5 years. I'd been wearing orthotics for about 17 years. So at the age of about 13, I'd gone and seen a doctor because I had some knee pain, and he sent me to a podiatrist. The podiatrist put me in orthotics, and I'd just been kind of robotically replacing my orthotics every couple of years because that's what I thought I should do. The knee pain hadn't really resolved, and I went to see a seminar one time. A chiropractor was there, and he was talking about barefoot running. And I was like, that's a bit weird, like barefoot running. Imagine that. Like, I could never do that because I need to have structured shoes, and I need to have orthotics and all the stuff that I've been told I needed to have. And as he started talking about how the foot is supposed to work and why maybe having a structured shoe and an orthotic might not be the best idea in terms of the function of your feet, it just made so much sense. And one of the things I remember thinking was, as a chiropractor, I would never just tell someone, well, your spine's not functioning very well, but don't worry about it. Just put this back brace on, wear it for the rest of your life. That'll support your back, and you won't need to use your back or any of your back muscles. And I thought I would never tell someone to do that. That just doesn't make any sense. But in essence, that's kind of what people are doing with orthotics. We're just putting a rigid support under there that's going to replace the need of our body to stabilize with our muscles, not allow our bodies to move in a natural way. And so it kind of just didn't make sense to me anymore. Anyway, so this chiropractor was running a workshop on how to run barefoot, and I went along to the workshop, and I immediately felt the difference. I started reading more about it. I read some books by Danny Dreyer. I read a couple other books on pose running. And I started trying it out, and I started implementing it. And the more I started implementing, the more it just seemed to make sense. I had about a 10-kilometer run I used to do around my home at that stage. It was very hilly. And it used to take me about an hour to get around that sort of circuit. And I remember the first time I decided to give this a go, I put aside my brand new pair of like Asics Kianos that I just spent over $300 on. I got myself a pair of Dunlop Volleys, which are just these really simple, flat, flexible, very, very cheap shoes. And I thought, I'm going to give it a go and see what happens. And I set out on that run, and in my head thinking, I'm just going to go really slowly because I want to give my body a chance. This is obviously something new. I don't want to injure myself. So I set out with the intention of just running this run nice and slowly. I got home and I checked my watch and realized that I'd actually done the run 5 minutes quicker than I normally did. I thought, that's really strange. And then as the day went on, I was doing my gardening and sweeping up leaves and all that sort of stuff. And I realized that I actually wasn't tired from my run either. And so I kind of went, this is really interesting. There's something to this. And the more I started to learn about the way your foot's designed to work, the forces that go up into your legs as a result of wearing shoes and having a heel lift and having a structured sole, as opposed to running barefoot. One of the things I learned was that if you run with a structured shoe, there's actually more impact going up through your knees, hips, and ankles than if you run totally barefoot, because of the way that it changes your technique and because of the way your foot is designed to work. Those arches there in your foot are designed to give. That's the whole purpose of the arch, is that it gives you some collapsibility into your foot to absorb that stress. And when you take that out, when you put a rigid structure under that, you lose that give that you have in your foot. If you put a big wedge under your heel, you tend to heel strike instead of midfoot strike. So your heel slams down harder into the ground. So you actually have greater impact coming up through your body as a result.
So, Dr. Brett, just to confirm then, so you went from pretty much having orthotics for a long time to going no orthotics and a 10K run, and you didn't get any pain at all?
No, I got heaps of pain. So
okay.
I didn't get any pain when I ran. It felt great. I finished really quickly. I felt awesome that day. And about 2 days later, I couldn't walk. My calves were absolutely smashed. So I certainly wouldn't recommend anyone going in and starting the way that I did. So, I always recommend people, if you're thinking of doing this, you want to integrate it slowly. So that either means cutting your mileage right down. So you'll either go straight from whatever shoes you're wearing right into a very minimalist or a totally barefoot if you wish, but cut your mileage right down. You might need to start running 500 meters as opposed to whatever you're doing currently. It might be 5Ks, 10Ks, 20Ks, whatever it is. You might need to cut that right back down to 500 meters. Now, if you want to maintain your mileage, then you've got two choices. One is you either put your regular shoes back on and run the rest of your run, or the second one you can do is, instead of going straight from whatever shoes you're wearing to totally barefoot or minimalist shoes, you can graduate. So, I could have gone from my Asics Kianos into something that was a bit more like a racing flat. I could have then gone from a racing flat into something like a Nike Free. I could have then gone from the Nike Free into something like a real minimalist shoe. And then from the minimalist shoe, I could have gone into barefoot. So you really want to stagger it in that way. Also, I worked with a really good podiatrist at the time. So I had someone helping me get my feet moving again because my feet have been jammed in that one position for 17 years. Some of those joints weren't moving and functioning very well. He was giving me exercises to work on strengthening up those muscles on the sole of my feet, improving the mobility of my feet, doing stretches for my calves, which was really important. And at the same time, I was also going and training in a gym where the rule of the gym was you had to take your shoes off to do the exercises. So I was doing all of my functional fitness barefoot as well. So there was a number of aspects to that. It wasn't, the first run, I just took my shoes off and went for a 10K run. But I wouldn't recommend anyone else doing it that way. There's a much more structured way you need to go about doing that.
Well, I'm glad you said that. Well, that's really interesting. And what I'm surprised about is that your podiatrist was actually quite supportive, because my experience with podiatrists have been quite the opposite to that. And I guess isn't their income sort of relied on orthotics?
Many podiatrists, I would say that's quite true, but not all podiatrists. So there are some podiatrists around who do take a more functional approach to the feet and who don't just put every single person into orthotics. They look more at, what's going on, where the dysfunction is. I mean, I just did an interview for my natural running e-course just the other day with a guy called the Barefoot Podiatrist, and he tries not to put anyone in orthotics if he can help it, and it's great, and so he looks at what's the actual issue, because the thing is, we evolved over millions of years to function without shoes. The shoes are not a natural thing for our body. So, the question shouldn't be how do we compensate for what's wrong with our body? The question should be how we fix what's wrong with our body. Why aren't I able to walk around or run around barefoot if that's a natural thing that my body should be able to do? And so by looking at the muscles, by looking at the joints, by looking at the nerves and figuring out what the actual underlying issues are, and then looking at your technique, because most of it is actually just technique, which, really technique isn't something we should have to teach, because most of us are born with great running technique and as kids have great running technique. But as a result of our modern lifestyles, our sedentary lifestyles, our postures, all of those things, and our shoes is probably one of the biggest components, we lose our good running technique. And so we have to relearn it. It often seems like a funny concept for people to relearn your running technique. Everyone sort of thinks, well, I can run. How hard can it be? My 2-year-old can do it. But it does make a big difference. Is relearning and getting that technique right makes a massive difference. But
Dr.
the
Brett,
question of podiatrists, you just got to find a good one.
Right. Okay. And so, Dr. Brett, you mentioned, though, that it's natural for us to be in bare feet. But if we look at how our landscape has changed, we're not in a natural environment anymore. So should we take that into consideration?
Well, yes and no. I mean, it's really interesting. I actually asked this question when we did the interview on the Wellness Guys podcast. We did an interview with Chris McDougall, who you may know from he authored the book Born to Run. And I asked him that question. I said, well, our landscape now has changed. We have we have these bitumen roads. Are we still okay to run around on bitumen roads? He said, well, he went to Africa and he said, he looked at some of the tribes in Africa who do the most running. They run huge distances on a regular basis. And he said the trails that they run on are old cattle trails. And so for centuries, probably for millennia, cattle have walked along these trails with hard hooves and have compacted that earth down. He said, really, that ground is as hard, if not harder, than the asphalt that we have. And so once again, we have evolved to run on that sort of terrain and that sort of ground. It's not soft and gentle. It's actually pretty firm. So his suggestion was that we should be able to run on bitumen without any shoes on, without any problems whatsoever. Now, I'm not sure whether that's true or not, but I think what I took from that is I think that it is far less of a concern than we make it out to be. Now, I don't run barefoot on the asphalt, but I run in minimalist shoes on the asphalt. I prefer to run on trails and through the national parks, so I do that much more so than I would on the asphalt. But it's certainly doable. And when your technique's right, and once again, the impact of that and the issues that causes on your body are actually far less doing it in a minimalist fashion than they are doing it with the shoes on.
Excellent. So I heard you mention something about your e-course, because I know you've got your Barefoot Athlete ebook.
Yes.
And I just heard you mention an e-course. Is that coming out soon?
It's coming out really soon. I'm actually going to sit down today and do a whole bunch of recording for it, which is really exciting. And so I've put together, I've been running barefoot workshops in Adelaide and around Australia for some time now. And so I teach people how to do this natural running technique, and it's amazing. In the course of about 90 minutes, you can see huge changes. I actually ran one in Adelaide last weekend, and there were just huge changes. I got a couple of messages sitting in my inbox right now from people who did it, and were just astounded at the difference in their running, how much easier it was, how much more they were able to do. One of them who hadn't run for like ages just ran 5Ks on the weekend and felt great. So I've now put that information into an e-course. So I'm creating it with videos and photos and teaching people from start to finish, going through everything they need to know, from stretches to exercises for your feet, to what shoes to wear, to how to do the technique, the whole lot, what professionals to go and see, what questions to ask them, all that sort of stuff is all in the e-course, as well as some expert interviews from people like Kelly Starrett, Danny Dreyer from Chi Running. They've got the guy I just mentioned, the Barefoot Podiatrist. So there's a whole bunch of video interviews in there as well. And yeah, it's going to be coming out really soon. So if people want to make sure they know about that, first of all, if they want to get started straight away, grab the ebook from my website. So that's drbretthill.com. They can find the ebook there. And for everyone who's purchased the ebook, I'll make sure I let them know as soon as possible when the e-course comes out, which will hopefully be within the next couple of months. But if they while they're on the website, they can sign up for my newsletter list, and then they'll definitely find out when the e-course comes out. But hopefully it's not too far away.
Oh, excellent. We'll link to all of that in the show notes, and that sounds amazing. I'll definitely find out from you as soon as it comes out, and I'll add that e-course to the show notes then as well, because I'm definitely interested in hearing what Kelly Starrett has got to say about it as well.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, so that sounds great. And so would that be the best step then for someone who wants to learn how to barefoot run? Just go either get your ebook or the e-course as soon as it comes out and follow the steps, as opposed to going out there and doing what you did and do a 10K run? Yeah.
Grab the ebook. The ebook's it's less than $10. Grab the ebook. That'll give you a great place to start, and you'll be able to get started on it. Once the e-course comes out, you'll be able to then get into it and really refine the technique and pick up a few extra nuances from the photos and videos and extras that are in there, because that's obviously a much more dynamic learning environment. But if they get the ebook, they can start right away and get into it.
And do you have any workshops coming up in Asia at all?
I don't. We might have to talk about that.
Okay.
That sounds like fun.
That would be awesome. I'm sure we could gather a fair few people in Hong Kong for you if you're interested.
That sounds like heaps of fun.
Excellent. So if you are interested and you're listening to the podcast, please let us know, and we will endeavour to get Dr. Brett Hill over to Hong Kong. So before I let you go, Dr. Brett, I was just wondering if I could ask a bit of a personal question, slightly random.
Of course.
Not so much to do with chiro or fitness, or perhaps. The question is, do you have a tattoo?
No, I don't. How's that? I thought of getting one when I was younger. I can't remember. I think my friend and I had both in around sort of 20s, had both broken up from relatively long-term relationships, and we were, having that bit of a crisis, as you do, and we thought about going and getting a tattoo. My mate said he was going to get one. And we got drunk. We went to the tattoo parlor, and I thought, you know what? I don't think I want to get a tattoo because that's like permanent, and I can't be able to change it. And so I got a piercing instead, because I thought, well, at least that I can take out later on. So I never had a tattoo, but I got close. And
what do you think it would have been?
Oh, that's a good question. I have no idea what it would have been.
Well, if you were to get one now, what would it be?
Oh, if I was to get one now, it would be my kids' names.
Oh, sweet. Excellent. Well, on that note, thank you very much, Dr. Brett. I loved having you on, and potentially might see you here soon with a workshop.
That sounds awesome.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
For all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ali.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review and subscribe.